people want the NYPD monitoring our social media posts, particularly for targeted communities and Black and Latinx communities, as well as historically underrepresented communities and Muslim communities in the wake of 9/11. Under the guise of national security, there's been a lot of surveillance of Muslim communities, and we talked about basically online stopping and frisking, so being able to, the NYPD effectively tracking everything you're doing online, from where you're checking in to who you're taking a picture with, and also how that has implicated over policing of public housing, as well as gang databases and different government offices and police offices, just watching and surveilling where groups of individuals hang out, whether or not they have any past criminal history or not, just by affiliation and targeting communities. So we talked about, that's what we talked about. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, we can give her a round of applause. Yeah. And the reason we're doing these quick readouts is obviously you won't have had an opportunity to go to every single session and learn every single thing, but this will give you a quick understanding of what the groups discuss and who the experts were in that group, so feel free to connect with people afterwards. Next, we'll do the child welfare group. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I was in the second section of the digital surveillance, excuse me, and we kind of spoke, I kind of shifted gears a little bit and spoke more to the places that maybe you are unconsciously providing the data, and also the facial recognition and the companies that are privatization of using that data, but also then like the TSAs and the NYPD, and that their access to the data, and then kind of us as an individual, you would go and complain about, like, I don't want my stuff used here or in the doctor's office or whatever, but like what are the really big issue being, like, as a joint community taking like the litigation and the severity of like this kind of regulation into like a bigger, the group being the one to contest and force like a different regulation of privacy and digital footprints. And kind of how that works. And so we kind of went over the things that you need to be aware of as an individual who's kind of unknowingly contributing the information, and also the being aware of what that looks like from the creation of what these technologies are actually used for, and like, is it worth it to put your thing, like what are you giving, and is it worth what you're going to get as a result?
I'll just go to the next group that's ready. Was it employment?
So basically for the education group, we talked about like how like most of the things that we implement is like bias. Like we talk about garbage in, garbage out. Which basically means that if we put in like bias into the algorithm, we basically end up like with the same result. And we talked about like how it's like unfair that like mostly like in the kids like applying for high school is mostly like white kids that's just being accepted to, in order for them to be accepted to colleges or high schools in general. So we talked about like it's like the ratio is unbalanced. Like most blacks or people of color is basically not like being accepted to good schools, so they see them as like poor or less land. So we basically wanted to take account for like students' opinion, like outside responsibilities that students had, take into account in order for them to be like accepted in general. So yeah.
You said on 18 times. I want you to know that.
That was amazing. Great job. Do we have anybody else from education? It's okay. You don't have to. Okay, what group is next? I don't believe we've got the employment readout. Do we have that? I'm assuming we are missing some people. Okay, we can do child welfare next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joyce McMillan, and I'm an activist in New York City. And this whole child welfare and predictive analytics thing is important to me because even prior to predictive analytics being implemented in any shape, form, or fashion, there was already a very big racial disparity in child welfare, just like in the prison system. They're actually the same system. So before I can tell you about what we discussed, I have to say to you some of the parallels between mass incarceration and foster care are they are both strip search. Children are strip searched under the guise of checking for marks and bruises, even though 85% of children go into foster care for reasons related to poverty that they frame to be neglect. They're both separated from everything they know and love. When we talk about solitary confinement, it is solitary confinement for a 3-year-old who's snatched away from his parents and his siblings to be placed in a stranger's home. They both eat what they are served. They both wear what they are given. They both have set visit times on set visit days. They both have oversight during the visit. We can go on, but I'm going to end it with they are both paroled back, one to the community and one to their families, and they both have oversight during the parole period. With that being said, any system built to protect children should in no way mimic a system that tortures adults. So they are using these predictive analytics now to say who is more likely to have their child removed. So that is being based on who's on public assistance, because again, they're framing poverty to be neglect, who lives in public housings, whose child has been left back, whose parent doesn't have a high school diploma, whose parent doesn't have a degree higher than a high school diploma. All of these things are some of the things that go into the algorithms that they're utilizing to say who would be more likely to end up in the child welfare system and who would be less likely to have their child returned. So that already is furthering what they have already laid the foundation of in showing the racial disproportionality of who is already affected. If we take that same data and then put it into an algorithm, we're going to continue to get the same thing with no accountability to anyone. So please tell your elected official no. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Joyce. Is there anyone else in the room who wants to do a readout from the breakout group? If not, we are going to proceed to the next part. Go ahead. Emily, can we get a mic over here?
Mm-hmm. Who is it? You.
Oh, sorry.
Hi. So we were, Abdullah and I am Dan. We were in the predictive policing group. So there are two different kinds of predictive policing, two kinds of tools. One set of the tools are based on time and place. So this is things like hotspot mapping and predicting that crimes are more likely at a certain time and place. And so police are directed to those places to look for crimes. And the other is person-based. So this is an attempt to identify people who will be either perpetrators or victims. And one of the things that we were talking about and learning about is that these tools don't really distinguish between the perpetrator or victim. It sort of just spits out names of people who are likely to be involved in these kind of crimes. We talked also about how these systems generally are profiling property crimes and violent personal crimes, but not things like financial crimes or housing fraud, the kinds of crimes that are committed by the powerful and the rich. And Abdullah, did you want to add as well?
So I went to the policing and the immigration one, and in both, like, we really get to see how automating these decision-making systems for people really affect the communities that are affected by bias that come from people in general. So for both, you see how it negatively affects the people who are affected by bias before the technology was being made. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead. Can we get a mic here?
Sure. Yeah.
So I attended the housing talk, and basically what we discussed is the history of discrimination when it came to redlining and how that evolved and how we fought against that. However, there's an evolution with how people are using fingerprints and taking your photos when you're going into your building, and there's even elaborate setups where they're using this data as a way to discriminate against who they allow to renew their lease when they're going into apartments. And we also talk about ways in which you can either try to opt out of that, but even if you opt out of the fingerprinting, there's still a possibility that your photos are being taken, and these data that they're collecting, it's being commercialized, and they're trying to figure out a way to compensate these people for their data that's being used in a commercial manner. So, thank you.
So I have a readout from the employment breakout, and we talked about automated systems being brought into every part of the employment pipeline, from recruitment to hiring, so automated resume filtering systems, and ads that target particular populations or are deliberately not shown to different populations, like elders or people who live in certain areas, through things like performance monitoring to scheduling, automated scheduling, and termination decisions. So one of the challenges that folks brought up was that these systems, there's no sort of requirement of disclosure, so you may not have any idea that decisions about your employment are being made by automated systems, and that these systems also encode bias, just like other automated decision-making systems we've talked about today, and that a lot of times the vendors who sell them to companies, they make a lot of big promises, but there's not really any science in the methodologies that they use. So in effect, they end up encoding biases. For example, one example was, Goldman Sachs uses a model of, the perfect employee, which is kind of a composite of all their past perfect employees, which just happen to be white men. And so if you do a video interview to get hired at Goldman Sachs, you're being compared against the ideal employee who's a white man. And so as far as what do we do about all of this, there's apparently a very robust organizing movement around, in particular, fair scheduling. So this is to address where people's schedules are decided based on only, a company's efficiencies and its return on investment. So the idea is for automated systems or scheduling systems to consider other things like commute times or childcare needs and things like that. There's also a number of organizing activities happening on the part of local SEIUs, the AWOOD Center, Gig Workers Rising, Drivers United, Fair Work Week campaigns, and campaigns for fair schedules. And then we also learned about a resource called Online Age Discrimination, which is trying to address discrimination in employment ads. And we talked about potentially organizing for advocacy at the state level with some of the state agencies that have jurisdiction over employment. So that's kind of a next step that came out of our group. All right, one more? Last one.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you to all of you for reporting out. I'm so happy I got a chance to hear about all the incredible things that y'all got to speak about in your separate groups. But one underlying or common denominator, of course, is the use of our data and also surveillance from the NYPD. And one thing that came out of our group is the fact that there is a hearing this Thursday for the public oversight of surveillance technology, Acton City Council. And so that would allow us to see exactly how the NYPD is surveilling our communities, and that again matters for so many of us coming from immigrant communities, communities of color. And so insight into that, and then also there's a rally for it beforehand to show public support at 12. So would encourage all of you who are interested to come out, but it hasn't passed, in the last couple of years because the NYPD, of course, has lobbied to make sure that our electeds do not vote for this. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. And the act that she's talking about is the POST Act. We'll talk a little bit about our action items in a few minutes, but just so you know, we have cards outside of this room for you to sign up to support the POST Act, and we have language for you to email and speak to your city councilor and tell them to support the POST Act.